Hello and welcome to another episode of the Culture Hour. I am your host and your founder, Shelley Smith, owner of Premier Rapport, where everything is workplace culture, because you absolutely know culture is not built in a day. Culture is built every day. I am always super excited, but I'm very super excited to have another wonderful guest on today. And we're going to talk about change management and decision making. But first, let me read Dennis's bio, and hopefully I will not mess up his last name. And if so, Dennis, you're going to correct me. Fair enough. Dennis
Absolutely, ma'am.
Volpe, did I say it right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Dennis Volpe is a principal leadership consultant and executive coach with the Leadership Research Institute, LRI, who specializes in leadership and organizational effectiveness, career and transitioning coaching, emotional intelligence and resilience, and team effectiveness. Dennis concentrates his work in the emerging leader programs, high potential and mid-level executive programs, and military veteran transition programs. Dennis is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and a certified executive coach through Columbia University Executive Coaching Program. Dennis has over 20 years of leadership and operational experience as a career naval officer, to include command at sea, multiple overseas deployments, an operational planner tour in Afghanistan, a tour as the director of future operations for U.S. Naval Forces Southern Command, and several years as a leadership instructor, leadership course coordinator, ethics facilitator at the U.S. Naval Academy. Dennis is a graduate of the University of Notre Dame Mendoza School of Business Executive Leadership course. Dennis is also a certified practitioner in EQI 2.0, as well as the Neethling Whole Brain Thinking Instrument, better known as MBI, Myers-Briggs, DISC, and even more. So I'm very excited to have you on the show today, Dennis. And I want you to fill in the blank, first of all, and introduce yourself, anything additional that you would like to throw out that I did not mention in your bio. And then I want to give you your first question. So first, over to you to say hello and tell us anything else you want to tell us about yourself. Oh my
Shelley,
gosh.
thank you very much for
Oh,
the
I did hit
introduction.
record. You're very welcome.
No, thank you very much for the introduction, and I appreciate the opportunity to spend time with you and your audience today. The only thing that I would add is super excited for the opportunity, and look forward to the conversation.
All right, very good. Well, let's get started. My goodness, if you're watching this, it's in the midst of COVID-19, the crisis, the pandemic, the very thing that is causing chaos personally and professionally throughout the entire world. And so today I thought we would talk about, especially because Dennis's forte is in the change management and specifically the decision-making process inside of that. Literally every day, companies, executives, employees are going through a multitude of changes and making decisions, trying to make decisions around things that they probably never had to deal with before. So, Dennis, we want to lean into your expertise and talk to us about trends you're seeing, you're hearing, you're reading with your existing clients, past clients around this COVID-19 and the changing landscape. And I'll let you take that conversation any way you want, and we'll keep it going.
Absolutely, Shelley. I appreciate it, and I think the biggest trend that I see and have been seeing recently is leaders not giving themselves enough space. And what I mean by that is space to think and space to respond. And instead, we're actually reacting to a lot of things. And when we react, what we're really doing is not giving, ourselves space to think about options, to think about the things that we may not see up front. And when we think out of a space of fear, then I like to say we're using our lizard brain, right? We always see is dinosaurs out there, and we're scared. And instead of taking some time, observing what's out there, orienting ourselves to our new reality, because you've identified this COVID-19 has provided all of us a new reality.
Yeah.
And then making a decision around, well, what do I see? What does it mean to me? What does it mean to my team? What does it mean to the people that I'm in charge of? And then acting upon that, rather than just saying, okay, here's the stimulus. What's the reaction? So for leaders, thinking about, well, how do I give myself some space? And that space is going to allow you to see the different perspectives, more information, and different options for you and your team to move forward.
What are some techniques? If you were executive coaching me on this very topic, what are some things that you would either ask me or suggest that I do in order to give myself, you calling it space, I call it grace, in order to maneuver. So what is something that you would suggest that I do?
My first suggestion is figuring out where that information is coming from. And are you taking the time to get the information from sources that make sense for you and give you the opportunity to not only see your side of reality, but also all the other sides of reality? So making sure that you're getting information and not just data. Because when we just get data and we don't actually process it, then it's not useful.
Mm-hmm.
But taking the time to process the information and say, okay, this is reality. This is what reality means. And this is what we should consider moving forward. I'm a big fan of periodic SWOT analysis in terms of, okay, where are we good right now? Where are our strengths? Where are our weaknesses? Okay, what are the opportunities and options that may exist? And what are the biggest threats for our team, our organization to move forward?
That totally makes sense. Are there some specific conversations that you're seeing on the repetitive now with your current clients that you're kind of those same stumbling blocks are happening over and over?
Well, I think the biggest stumbling block is sometimes we get too much information, and knowing when to turn the noise off. So that way you can say, okay, you know what? Now I have enough information to make a decision. And with the understanding that, you know what? You might make a decision that's not the best, but it's a decision so you can actually move forward in a positive direction.
Mm-hmm. Are there some techniques that you give to people when they feel like they're on information overload? You mentioned the SWOT analysis. Is there any other specific things or exercises that you have them sort of disseminate? I'm a big fan of writing things down and putting them in categories and journaling, but I'm always curious if there's other techniques out there.
A really good, simple one for me, and it sounds simple, and it might even sound funny, but to breathe, to actually spend time
What a novel
focused on your breath and say, okay, you know what? Things are pretty stressful right now.
Mm-hmm.
How do I give myself the opportunity just to breathe? So I can say, okay, let's move forward with this.
So it sounds like a lot of
And
it is mindset. You're suggesting the mindset at shift or settling. Am I understanding you correctly?
oh, absolutely. Mindset is a huge thing. When you think about crisis, and that's what this is. Crisis provides opportunity, and it's up to us to see that opportunity. So if you have a growth mindset, you're going to be able to take the time and figure out the opportunities that may exist so you can move forward.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in a fixed mindset, you don't have that opportunity because you see everything as a threat.
That is so true.
So how do you take the time to make sure that you're open and you're curious and you're committed to learning?
What are some of the common things, leaning in a little bit more into the decision-making process, and certainly not necessarily driven on the COVID-19, but just in general, what are some things that typical leaders forget to take in when it comes to the decision-making process to ensure that they are including others and not being isolated or making decisions in a vacuum?
Sure. I think when we think about the decision-making process as leaders, very often we're very, very action oriented.
Mhm.
So what happened? What do I need to do about it? And we miss two important steps. So we have, you have that observational step and you have the action step.
Mhm.
And what we really need to do is talk about, well, okay, this happened. What was the impact?
Mhm.
And what did that impact mean? So actually finding the meaning around the the stimulus before you actually take action on that stimulus.
That makes sense. What do you do when people have the uh-oh moment? They have taken they've been too reactionary on the stimulus, to your point, and they're having to backpedal. What are some things that you suggest for people to be able to either apologize with grace, to go back and pivot with grace? What are your recommendations there when you have that, oh gosh, I didn't handle that right moment?
The key component to that is be human, be genuine, be open, and admit your mistakes. Because when you think about taking action, and as leaders, you want to be action oriented. And you know what? Sometimes we may not do everything right, but letting people know that, hey, this is what I did, this is why I did it, and these were the implications, and making sure that you take the time to look at it holistically, to say, okay, this is what we did, this was the impact, positive and negative, and what are we going to do the next time? So
Mhm.
that way it's actually a lesson learned and it's not just an observation.
Yeah,
So that way we fail forward instead of falling backwards.
I love the fail forward concept. I haven't heard that in a while, but I love that. So let me change gears a little bit and probably will lean into everything that you did at the Naval Academy. And we'll talk about, courses and really just delivering to probably some personality traits that were, strongly hardwired in, assertiveness and initiative, taking charge, big picture thinking. How do you get individuals, and often it's the executive team, how do you get individuals that are primarily hardwired in that take charge, move fast, willing to take risk, and everybody is kind of, their mojo is in sync with that? How do you get them to slow down, metaphorically at times,
Sure.
to slow down, but yet still be able to lean into one another and to listen to one another, setting the ego aside? So all the things that you talked about, but I know that in the naval officer world, for sure, that's easier said than done. Yes?
Sure.
No?
No, you're right. You're 100% right. And part of it is, well, how do you define assertiveness? And my definition of assertiveness has changed over time. But assertiveness does not always mean action all the time and forsake everyone else.
Yep.
I like to think of assertiveness as the convergence of courage and confidence and empathy and respect for other people. So, there's a continuum, and you have being submissive on one side and you have being aggressive on the other.
Yeah.
And so assertiveness being in the middle. And how do you get from being submissive to being assertive is you have to have the self-confidence and courage to say, okay, this is what I think, this is what needs to be done, and I'm going to move forward with it But to make sure that you're not completely on that aggressive side, you have to have empathy and respect for the people that you're dealing with. And you have to be open to meet them where they are, because not everyone is going to have the same ideas, the same understanding, or even be hardwired to do things the same way you do. And taking the time to understand that and being open to that is, I think, the key to allowing yourself to have better interpersonal relationships as you move forward in any organization.
Absolutely. So do you think that it's an equal balance between, the thinking side, the brain pieces, or the personality side, or is it the cognitive, the emotional intelligence, the behavioral? I'm always, when people live in that sphere that I live in as well, I'm always curious to your take on that. So how would you explain maneuvering through all the parts of the human being, and how to, develop a course, for example, to be able to give somebody who is on the aggressive scale more empathy, and the person who is more on the more amiable scale to be more assertive and or independent. So what do you
Sure.
lean into on all of those parts of a human?
Well, the big thing I lead into is self-reflection and self-awareness,
Hmm.
and helping people understand their reality. Because very often we don't understand our reality as good as we think we do.
And
And
how do you suggest we figure that out? For somebody who's
well,
listening, who's like, well, how do I understand my own reality? How do I do that?
well, there's assessments out there that help you do that.
Hmm.
But guess what? There's also people out there that can help you do that.
There you go.
Whether that's friends, whether that's family, whether that's coworkers. But guess what? It requires this thing called vulnerability, and it's not something that comes easy to some people. But
Yeah.
you have to be open and you have to be vulnerable to say, hey, you know what? I'm trying to learn about myself, so
Yeah.
that way I could truly be the best version of me. So that way I could be more effective, I could be more efficient. And to do that, I just want your perspective on what I do well, what do I do not so well, and what I really, really need to focus on.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So whether it's from an assessment point of view, whether or if it's simply just having a conversation with, I like to say, your inner tribe,
Hmm.
those people that really matter to you and who really, really know you and have seen you interact in a variety of different environments is super useful.
Yeah. Well, and that they're going to be very real with you and honest with you.
Yeah.
So, and many people that they think are in their inner circle will not necessarily tell them in full transparency the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent, and what have you. So,
Yeah.
Dennis, is there any final thoughts or things that you can share as we kind of move forward in this forever changing environment that we don't know when we're going to come out of it? Are there any tips, thoughts, resources, exercises that you want to share with the group before we start to put a
Sure.
wrap on today?
Now, when I think about what we could do during this time, and I've talked to some people about this already, but crisis and this COVID-19 reality is a crisis. I think it gives us opportunity for four different things. It gives us an opportunity to give thanks to the people who are on the front lines, both abroad and here at home. But it also gives us an opportunity to give thanks for where we are and to be grateful for the things that we have. And then it gives us also the opportunity to self-reflect. And Shelley, we talked about that. It gives
Yeah.
us an opportunity to really understand who we are and what we're good at, what we're not so good at, and what we need to fix. But it also gives us an opportunity to explore. So taking advantage of the time that we have to say, okay, you know what? I'm really interested in different options, different perspectives, different realities. Having conversations with people like you is part of my exploration. And then action. What do you really want to do? And then do it.
Mm-hmm. I think that First of all, I love all of those, so thank you. I think that, part of this fear that you began to describe early in our conversation, it's getting comfortable with the discomfort that's going on, the unknown, the lack of control, regardless of where you are on the dominant scale and whether you're willing to take risk or not. I think it's that unknown, that fear of what is the new normal, when is the new normal coming back, are we ever going to return to whatever, XYZ. And I think it's that unnervingness that is leaving everyone unsettled, and the inability at times to reflect appropriately, and to get comfortable in the silence, and to get comfortable in, well, where am I and who am I and what should I do and how should I act and how should I communicate. I mean, I will, definitely admit that I have been in that space myself where I thought I would never be in that space. And it's quite interesting, the discovery that is happening, to your point. So I love those tips.
Well, and Shelley, I think you made a huge point. And I think the point, when you start thinking about how we think and how we observe and how we orient, is the biggest takeaway is identifying what's in your sphere of control right now,
Yeah.
and then realizing what's outside of it, and focusing on what you can control and putting effort into that.
Hmm.
Because if you want to change the world, you got to start in your own backyard. So
Absolutely. and
figuring out
and
what we can control.
and what we control is really small right now. Well, one can
Compared to
argue
everything
we are,
else,
yeah,
absolutely.
and one can argue that we're never in control to begin with, which is definitely true. So, Dennis,
Absolutely.
what's the best way that people, if they want to reach out to you for more information and continue the conversation or pick your brain, what's the best way they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, the two best ways to get in touch with me are on LinkedIn and via email. And my email is really, really simple. It's dennis.volpe@lri.com. And I'm Dennis Volpe on LinkedIn as well.
Very good. And Dennis's last name is Volpe. And for those of you who are listening, just so you can pull that in, and for those of you who are viewing, you can see that I have put the information on the screen as well. So, Dennis, thank you so much for being here today, leaning into the conversation of change and decision making and self reflection. Definitely appreciate you being with us today, and we wish you well and to be safe. And for those of you watching or listening, please keep the comments coming. Please keep the suggestions on guests that I should have on coming. And remember, again, culture matters. It starts with you. It starts with your team. It starts with your organization. It's how we make an impact on our world and our culture on the day-to-day basis. That's it. My name is Shelley Smith. Be safe and be good. Have a good afternoon.